in the series, Whatever Happened to the 10 Lost Tribes? And when I say 10 lost tribes, that means I'm already making the assumption that they are lost. But do we really know what the word lost means? There's different ways of describing what lost is, and B'ezrat Hashem, throughout the lecture, you will see what I mean by lost. But that is how they are called, because they are no longer with us today as one nation. What happened to them, and is it possible for us to identify where they are, who they are, and what is going to happen to them in the very near future? Why is this an important topic? Well, first of all, for those of you who have been following the lectures about the Geulah, the redemption, this is a very important component in the ultimate Geulah, in the ultimate Tahalich, the process of redemption. Many of the prophecies, believe it or not, of the Geulah have already been fulfilled. We are actually in the midst of this process. We're living in the generation of Mashiach. For those of you who still do not believe it, we'll just take a look at the very important fact that we have over 6 million Jews in Israel, more than any other country in the diaspora, for the first time in the history of the diaspora. There are more Jews living today in Israel. But the Jews living in Israel and outside of Israel, like here in America, are only from about 2-3 tribes. We want to know where everybody else is, because part of the prophecies clearly state that they will be coming back and joining us. So even though some of the prophecies are materializing as we speak, Jews are going back home, Eretz Yisrael is being developed, people are doing teshuvah, a very important prophecy has yet to be fulfilled, and that is the coming back of the 10 lost tribes. It's an important topic as well, because when dealing with this question of who is a Jew and who is not a Jew, we're touching on a topic called Yehus, the lineage. Hopefully, most of you know where you come from, who your mother was, who your father was. But you can only go back so many generations. Not everybody has what's called the Megillat Yochassin. And Megillat Yochassin is where you can actually know by name who your great-great-great-grandfather was perhaps 10, 12 generations ago. Some people are lucky. It was handed down in the family, and they still have it. It would be good to know for sure where we come from, and if possible, from which tribe we come from. But not everybody has that clarity. Unfortunately, because of the galut, the diaspora, the scattering of all the Jews, a lot of that information has been lost. I'm excited about this topic because, B'ezrat Hashem, very soon, when we do discover them, the 10 lost tribes, what it means is that our family will grow. And once again, there will be achdut, there will be unity between all the tribes. And I just gave away a key word to this topic, unity. Because after all, why did they break up? Why did they have to go into an exile to begin with? Why did they go in a different direction than everybody else did? So just a little bit of a historical background. We need to know a little bit of history as to how this all came about. What you see right now in the PowerPoint presentation are two maps, almost identical, one in English, one in Hebrew, of approximately where the tribes were once upon a time. Upon entering Eretz Yisrael, upon settling the land and conquering the land from the nations that dwelled there in the past, Am Yisrael is divided into tribes, each one with its own geographical location, except for Shevet Levi, who has no one particular location. The Kohanim, the Leviim, are almost everywhere. Even though they had certain cities where they dwelled, it did not belong to them. The land is being divided between the various tribes. And so far, so good. The Bet HaMikdash, the first one, is built. In the very beginning, at least, everybody is there. Everybody would come and visit the Bet HaMikdash at least 3 times a year, from the north, from the south, regardless of where you were. But unfortunately, during the First Temple era, there was a Yetzer Hara, an evil inclination towards idol worshipping. Something that we're not familiar with today, because we can't even understand how people can worship idols, stones. But we do know there was a Yetzer Hara. A Yetzer Hara meaning that there was some power some power that existed and still does, a power that unfortunately misled many people, and Jews as well got caught up in this yetzer hara, in this inclination of worshiping these powers. There were other problems as well, but our tradition says that this is one of the reasons why some of the tribes were thrown out of Israel. But before they were thrown out, before they went into exile, perhaps a more tragic thing occurred. The entire Jewish nation split into two. And this is happening after Shlomo HaMelech. The 7th year of the reign of Hoshea ben Elah. You have two kings, you have two kingdoms, Malchut Israel and Malchut Yehuda. They were split. We don't really have the time to go through the history of how this all came about. But as you can imagine, politics has a lot to do with it. The nation split, and the larger number of tribes were in the north, and a few tribes were in the south. For the most part, the tribes that were in the south were Shevet Yehuda, Binyamin, and Shimon. Everyone else was in the north. Unfortunately, during this whole time, the northern nations were not visiting the Bet HaMikdash. They were held back by the majority of the kings who reigned over them, who were not sympathetic towards their brothers in the south. So as you can imagine, little by little over the time, the Jews in the north, the tribes in the north, were becoming more and more distant from Judaism. And the time came during the reign of Chizkiyahu and during the reign of Hoshea ben Elah, who was the king in the north. The Syrian king besieged the towns and villages of the north, and he exiled those tribes to Ashur, to Assyria. ויגל מלך אשור את ישראל אשורה וינחם בחלך בחבור נהר גוזן והרי מדי. Initially, at least, they were placed in Assyria. Assyria was a large area that comprised of portions of Turkey, Armenia, Iraq. That was Ashur. But here it is also specified that they went to certain cities. Cities that one may not possibly identify today, but they are called Halach, Habor, Nahar, Gozan, which is the river of Gozan, and the cities of Madai. Now the cities of Madai is a little easier to identify because Madai is northern Iran, centered around the city of Hamadan. So we know that at least initially that is where they arrived. If you look at Sefer Divrei Yamim, this previous quote was from Sefer Melachim. If you look at Sefer Divrei Yamim, there's a little bit more information. It says that Tiglat-Pileser, the king of Assyria, took Reuveni, Gadi, Chatzi Shevet Menashe, half of Menashe, who was on the other side of the Jordan, and brought him to Halach Havor Hara. There's an additional name over here, Nahar Gozan. Ada Yom Hazeh. The key words Ada Yom Hazeh tell us that they're still there, or around there. That's what's not so clear, because if they're still there, why can't we find them there? So the commentators explain that even though that's where they were driven, they did not stay in one location, they continued eastward. So we are expecting to see the tribes move on towards the east and populate a larger region, a larger area than they initially occupied. In order to get an idea of where they are, I put up a map over here of the Middle East, and I drew some circles so you can have an idea of approximately where they were. But before I tell you what these locations are, we need to become familiar with who exactly went. Who are we talking about that went into exile? We talked about the 10 tribes. The 10 tribes are not the only ones that went into exile. There's a very special group called Yonadav or Bnei Yonadav Bnei Rechavim. According to our tradition, that special group are the descendants or children of Yitro, the father-in-law of Moshe. A very special group who observed certain strict laws of Nezirut, based on what their father had told them to do, what he instructed them to do. They led a very, very strict conduct. They were very, very observant. Very special group. It's just another group that also went into exile. The third group that is the most fascinating group of all, that we're going to speak about soon too, is Bnei Moshe, the children of Moshe. Also a separate group that also went into exile. Now, it is possible that even portions of Yehuda and Binyamin went along with them. The reason I say portions, because even though we saw before that the map pretty much described where everybody was, people moved around. Not only did people move around, in Yerushalayim there were ambassadors, if we can call them that, from the other Shevatim too all the times. And what's interesting is Shimon lived around Yehuda and Binyamin. He was in the south. And some people actually want to believe that he never went into exile, but that's not accurate. The tradition says that Shimon went along with the rest of the tribes. The question is exactly when and how, if all of him went or not. There is a tradition that Yirmiyahu went and brought some of them back, and eventually they joined us, and today they're mixed up amongst us. So it is possible that today, unless you're a Kohen or a Levi, which you're from Shevet Levi, you're either Yehuda or Binyamin, or possibly there might be some vestige of the other tribes as well that joined us, but it would be very, very few. The majority of the tribes left. And they went initially to the areas that you can see on the map. If you can see the area up here on the north of Iraq, north of Iran, that is an area where traditionally there was also a group of converts called the Kuzarim, or the Khazarites. There have been many, many groups, which we'll talk a little bit about them too, in the world, that either some experts claim they come from the 10 tribes, or they themselves think so. All we know is that that is a potential location, and anybody who lives there may be originally from the tribes. The problem today is that we have Jews that are from Georgia who observe Torah and mitzvot just like everybody else, and most likely they're not from the 10 lost tribes, simply because they've been in touch with us all the time. They have the full tradition, the Torah shebichtav, the Torah shebal peh, the oral and the written word. Could it be that the 10 lost tribes, if some of them went there, joined them, and eventually became one family, one group? Possibly, we don't know for sure. But that is one location. So Jews in that area, or if they're not Jews today, may be from the 10 lost tribes. I drew a circle. You may not be able to see it well. Down below in Africa, in Ethiopia, we'll be talking about the Falashas. Where do they come from? I drew another circle in North Saudi Arabia, because according to many, many stories and testimonies, there's a group of what appear to be nomads, but they're not exactly Arabs. They believe in the Torah of Moshe. A lot of stories about who they are, where they come from. They look different than everybody else. They're not that many in number. And one opinion says that that group in northern Saudi Arabia that very few people know about is from Bnei Yonadav Bnei Rechavim, the group that I mentioned before. They look different. They have different customs, even though they speak Arabic. Another location that I drew, you have two circles close to each other, part of the Soviet Union. One is in the area of Turkmenistan. The other area is in Uzbekistan, where Bukhara is located, and Tajikistan. These are traditionally locations that we all know Jews lived there for many, many years. When I say many, many years, I mean over 1,500 years, we have a tradition of continuous contact of people who have traveled there, including Binyamin Ibn Tudela, including others. There's been correspondence with them, but still it was not very, very clear what's their origin. Are they just plain old Jews like we are, from Shevet Yehuda and Binyamin, that just traveled there on business or for whatever other reason, or could it be from the 10 lost tribes? It's very difficult to know with certainty, but that, as I will show you with some video footage, that is a very possible location or where the 10 lost tribes may still be there today. The other circle, right here in northern India, that's the area called Kashmir. As you know, Pakistan and India have been having several disputes about that area. That is another location where there are potentially people that are from the 10 lost tribes. And one of the greatest emphasis of all, which we'll talk a lot about tonight, is this area in yellow, which borders Afghanistan and Pakistan, which is all over the news today, and it's for a good reason in the news. You will soon hear why. It's not just because of America being there. It's not because of the Russians having been there before. It's not only because the British were there before. There's a lot of, as we say in Hebrew, a lot of balagan over here. A lot of commotion going on, and for a good reason. That, as I will prove to you tonight, beyond the shadow of any doubt, is one of the certain locations where they are still today. But I have to prove it. So for that, I'm going to be sharing with you pictures. And for the first time, Baruch Hashem, we're in the 21st century, so we have video, sound, pictures. You don't have to just believe me and hear me. You can actually hear them and see them almost live. So even though I gave this lecture many, many years ago, for those of you who remember, this one will be a little bit different because you will actually get to hear them. Before we go on to describe the peoples who live there, I want a little bit talk about a very interesting quote that's brought down in Yonatan ben Uziel that very few people are aware of. Again, this whole topic is something that is of some sort of an enigma or a mystery. Not too many people know too much about it because it really requires a lot of research. There's very little information. We're using testimony from Goyim that were just telling us a story without realizing what they were saying. We're basing ourselves on the Midrashim, on Pesukim, that do not give us too much clarity, but at least give us an idea of what exactly happened and what we should be expecting. This group, however, is the most mysterious of all. The group that I mentioned earlier called Bnei Moshe. Yonatan ben Uziel basically says, for those of you who can't understand the Aramaic or the Hebrew at the bottom, Yonatan ben Uziel says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe, listen, even though I will forgive the Jewish nation for having made a golden calf, and I would have preferred just to eliminate those who were involved in that sin, I will forgive them. Nevertheless, I will make a separate nation from you. A separate group of people just from Moshe Rabbeinu. And even though we have Levi amongst us, the Levi is not the children of Moshe. Anybody who's a Levi today is most likely not from the children of Moshe. He's just from the rest of the tribe. The children of Moshe were special. Hashem took them about 135 years prior to the destruction of the Second Temple. That is when this occurred, that they all were exiled. But they were exiled in different ways and in different directions. The children of Moshe somehow were taken by a cloud and placed on the other side of the river Sambatyon. A famous river called Sambatyon. A river that throws up stones 6 days a week. And right before Shabbat, a couple hours before Shabbat, the river rests. And this is actually proof that Hashem created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, as we will soon see. So we have a description of this river, as you can see in this midrash. It's a little bit of a question whether there's any water in the river, because one version seems to say that it's a river of stones and sand that has some sort of volcanic activity 6 days a week. And one description says that there's water, it's a regular river. In any event, this group called Bnei Moshe is on the other side. I said the other side because according to the Midrash that says that they went to Sambatyon, the group of tribes, some of them came close to Sambatyon and the others went beyond the Sambatyon. And there's a big distance between the two of them. But those that went beyond the Sambatyon are surrounded, protected by this river. Nobody should bother them. In other words, there's a group of Jews out there that according to our tradition are completely observant. This Bnei Moshe are completely observant till this very day, righteous. They have their own king. They're not to be bothered. And therefore, not everybody will be able to know where they are, because the idea is not to bother them. As opposed to who? As opposed to the rest of the tribes. The rest of the tribes, unfortunately, many of them did assimilate, but did not necessarily intermarry. And that is the key word that I said before, when I said lost. Lost could be lost, intermarried, gone. They don't look Jewish. Lost could also be that they just assimilated, took on another faith or religion, but they still look Jewish, still practice some Judaism. And that is exactly what we will see, that there's different kinds of tribes, different groups. Some are closer to Judaism, some are farther from Judaism. Some look more Jewish, some look less Jewish. But before we go on to them, I just want to remind you that this group, we have a tradition, they're going to join us. V'alu Moshim behar Tzion lishpot et har Esav. That verse is talking about the righteous tzaddikim who will come and take over the land of Israel. The children of Moshe, who are on the other side of the Sambatyon, many, many stories are recorded of people having gone there, people having been there, Goyim having spent time in that area. So we know that this river existed for a while. The question is, where is this river today? Well, here are some nice pictures of rivers, but it's not the river. I'm sorry. I wish I had a real picture. But I tried to pick the best pictures. I guess it's not showing the entire frame. But anyway, there's some very nice rivers out there. And this river is supposed to surround these children of Moshe. I put the quote here of the Yerushalmi, Masechet Sanhedrin. Actually, this one is from the Bavli, not from the Yerushalmi, the Babylonian Talmud. That says, how do we know, as one king asked the Jewish rabbi, how do we know that today is Shabbat? He tells him, just go to the river Sambatyon. It will prove it to you that today is Shabbat, because it rests. It works a whole week throwing up stones. Go there and you will see today it's resting. So this was actually proof that Hashem created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. So where is the river Sambatyon? I did a lot of research over the years, a lot of research to try to figure it out. I wasn't planning on traveling there because it's dangerous. It still is. Some of these locations are very dangerous to travel. People have attempted in the past, they have failed. Few people have made it there. So what I did was I gathered all the stories, put together more or less, where people described it's a half an hour, not a half an hour, 10 days or 2 months or whatever it is distance from where they were till that location. If you just went straight, I don't know if it was a straight route or not, you'd eventually get there. So I drew some arrows over here just to show you the locations that I came up with. One is in the area of Tibet or just north of Tibet. One is in the area north of Calcutta, north of Nepal. The other area is closer to Burma, not too far from the river, the Irrawaddy River. There are other locations. Part of the difficulty in ascertaining the exact locations because there's a lot of contradictions. Somebody said he saw it in Africa. Now, once I see something like that, I said, wait a minute, how could that be? That's completely in a different continent. So you see that there's a little bit of misleading information, which makes it more difficult. And perhaps that's all min hashamayim, so we shouldn't be able to find it. Remember that one of the ideas of why these tribes, including Bnei Moshe, but not so much Bnei Moshe, most of the tribes are isolated and were not known too much about. Part of the idea is that that's the way it was decreed, Bashamayim, that they should be like Asurim, that they should be like in a prison. That was a punishment for what they did. That they will not be able to join us back until Mashiach comes. So part of being in a prison means no contact with the rest of the world, the rest of the Jewish world. The Nahar Sambatyon, however, is a little bit more mysterious, but as we understand, it is intended to be so people should not bother them. People should not go after them, looking for them. But today we have satellites, right? Shouldn't it be possible to find them with satellites? Well, you know that just about a year ago they found a new group of Indians in the Amazon jungle that they didn't know ever existed. Even though they've covered most of this earth by foot or by plane, they haven't gone to every single spot. Up until 50 years ago, there were many locations in Brazil, which is bigger than the United States, by the way, of places that were never discovered. People never went in there. Today, people are going in little by little. There are planes, but there are still locations in the world that people may not have gone into. So it's not a big problem, the fact that we have satellites and we're not able to see certain things, because there's so much a satellite can see. There's so much a satellite can see. And even though people have gone out, people have explored, they haven't covered every single inch of the globe. And when you have on top of that Hashem's desire of not allowing people to see it, there are many ways that he can hide it. Many ways. So therefore, the fact that we haven't found doesn't mean anything. There have been reports, supposedly by astronauts and others, who have seen something strange in the area of Vietnam. I've tried to locate those reports. I'm not so sure how accurate they are, but there have been all kinds of isolated reports of having seen or heard about that river. But today we don't know, but eventually we will know. There are a lot of things that the rabbis tell us are begeder ro'eh v'no nir'ah. They can see us, but we cannot see them. The demons are one of them, right? We can't see them. I know some of you have seen some demons around here. I know, right? But most demons we do not see, right? There are things we can't see. So even though it's there, you may not be able to see it. And this could be one of them. Nevertheless, we know it exists. Great rabbis like the Rambam were asked, well, what do you have to say about this Sambatyon? And he says, yes, this river is for real. I know, he says, that my grandfather in his time saw a jar of the sand of this river, and you can see the pebbles in the jar jumping up and down like jumping beans, right? For 6 days. And a couple hours before Shabbat, they rested. The Rambam says that his grandfather told him about it. So they asked the Rambam, so what do you have to say? Where is it today? He says, as far as he's concerned, nignaz. It's hidden. As of when was it hidden? There's one opinion that this river was hidden around the year 1452, 1454, right before or right around the Inquisition time, Spanish Inquisition. I saw that somewhere. I don't know how accurate that is. Up until then, it was still known to people. There was still contact. I think it was known even later, but that's just one opinion. I think the Ridvaz is of the opinion that it dried out, but I don't understand how he says it dried out. It was never full of water, unless it just completely stopped working. There are various opinions as to what happened to it. I just would prefer to say that people do not know where it is than to say that it just stopped working. Nevertheless, this is a very exciting piece of news. There are many, many stories of people who have gone there and seen tremendous things with these group of people, because this group of people would be the only one who's very religious. Everybody else is somewhat assimilated. So imagine meeting somebody today who, according to all descriptions, is tall, strong, holy, righteous, and very learned. Learned, however, only in the Torah that they received. They don't have the Gemara and the Mishnayot. But for those who went to the other side of the Sambatyon and who were able to describe what they saw, it was a beautiful land, full of only clean animals, no unclean animals. Very, very wealthy, with their own king. Incredible description of something that we don't see today. Nevertheless, apparently it still exists. As you can see from the various sources, we know that the Galuyot of Aseret HaShvatim Yehuda Binyamin went in different directions. Yehuda and Binyamin are scattered all over the world, whereas the tribes are on about 3 or 4 locations. I say 3 or 4 because there's different midrashim that say that they went at different times. They did not exactly all go to the same place. And we do know that they went further after their initial location. It was after they arrived where they did. We do know that they continued on. The Midrash continues on to say that our tradition is that they will all come back. They will come back from all sorts of places that you never imagined they would come, including a place called Sinim, Me'eretz Sinim. Me'eretz Sinim? What's Sinim? China. According to most opinions, most commentaries, Sinim is China. So what we have here is those going on the other side of the Sambatyon will come out. Those close to the Sambatyon will come back. Those who are in the north, those who are in China, different locations, are all going to come back. Some are described as being in darkness. Some are described as being in a prison. What's darkness? So some say the darkness is describing the Himalaya mountains, because the mountains are so tall that they cover up the sun. Yeah. There are 2 opinions that we spoke about before as to where they actually went, whether it was some going to Africa or some going to Asia. The majority opinion is that this is in Asia, except for 1 or 2 tribes. So these mountains or this darkness could mean darkness that we cannot see them. It could also mean that they are completely or partially assimilated in darkness. There are those who are in a sort of prison, means that they're being held back, but we may be able to know who they are because they're not in darkness. Regardless, the Midrashim, for those who want sources, are full of information that these tribes are going to come back. And that's why I'm sharing with you the sources, is because you should know that there are a lot of sources that are going to be joining us back very, very soon. Here are some more Pesukim, not from the Midrash, but from the prophecies of Yeshayahu and Navi, that there are those who are going to come back from Eretz Sinim, those who are Asurim, those who are in the Choshech, those who are in the east, and those who are in the west. They're going to come from all corners of the world. However, one of the most interesting prophecies of all is our role in bringing them back. Some of them, of course, are going to come back with Mashiach. Mashiach ben Yosef brings back his tribes. Menashe, Ephraim, Yosef brings back his share, his portion of the tribes. Mashiach ben David is in charge, if we can call it that way, of Yehuda and Binyamin. So here it says very clearly in Yirmiyahu, "Bayamim hahem yelchu bet Yehuda al bet Yisrael v'yavo yachdav me'eretz tzafon al haaretz asher nechadeh." In other words, that we will go, those of us who are from Yehuda, we will actually be involved in bringing them back. So there will be an effort made, and there are efforts being made today as we speak by various groups and organizations to try to find out where they are. Some of them, as you will soon see pictures of, are actually coming back now, as we speak. Some of them are in Israel already. So there is a clear prophecy describing our efforts to bring them. The other pasuk that you may not see too clearly talks about them being gathered from the north, being gathered from all the corners of the world, which means that many of them will be distant from us, very, very far away. The good news of all of this is that B'ezrat Hashem, when the time does come, they will join us and we will become one nation again. As it says in the Navi, "V'karav otam echad el echad," they will become once again one nation, not split into 2 kingdoms. They will have one king, and they will all come and be together in Harei Yisrael, in the cities, in the mountains of Israel. And they will no longer be split into 2 nations, into 2 mamlachot. That's the good news. So the prophet is not only telling us that they're going to be coming back and joining us, the prophet is telling us that they're going to be together with us as one nation. There's going to be a hadut. There's going to be unity. Once again, we will be able to go back and have one king, and that's the Melech HaMashiach. Here is the other source in the Talmud Yerushalmi that tells us that the various tribes who went to the various locations will be coming back more or less from those locations that they went to. So even though they are dispersed, even though they have been assimilated, some of them, nevertheless, Hashem has His ways. We are going home today. Yehuda and Binyamin is already making aliyah. And they're not going to be left behind. Hashem will take care of them too. Some of them will have perhaps a dream that the time has come to come. And some of them have a clear tradition, and you will meet them soon in a video, that when the Mahdi comes, Mahdi is the Farsi word for Mashiach, for the leader who will redeem them. When he comes, that is when they will come back to Judaism. That is when they will come back to Israel. They have a clear tradition of that. They're waiting for that. So some of them know more than others. Some of them know less. So some of this information that I'm going to share with you right now, some of the videos, are going to be very, very shocking to some non-Jews who are watching it. You say, what? I'm a Jew? According to this, I come from Israel? And the best thing, if I could speak to them, I would tell them, listen, you have to ask your grandfather. Because the further you go back in time, the better the chances that they knew more than what you know today. Some know better, some know less. So now let's meet the groups. What you see here is a map of various peoples who either claim they come from us, from the Jewish nation, or the experts have found simanim, all sorts of signs, traditions, customs, names, beliefs, that they are from the Jews. You'd be surprised. I mean, some people even think the American Indians, Peruvian Indians. The most important ones here, even though we can't discuss all of them, the most important ones are some of the Ethiopians, of course, that we have a clear tradition about, the Karen tribe, the Afghans, and perhaps also the Judeo-Tats, the mountain Jews. It doesn't have here all the names of the groups, but I will mention them a little bit later. This map is a small representation of the various peoples on the globe that either claim are from Jews or that the experts have found them to be related to Jews. Here's an example. I don't think they look too Jewish. They are called the Lemba tribe. Lemba, they are found in southern Africa, not in South Africa per se, but in the southern part of Africa. You can see them holding a shofar there, something that looks like a shofar. They have a tradition. There are some similarities between some of the things that they do and we do. So we have tradition, we have similarities, but they don't look Jewish. Well, the same will be with the Falashas. A lot of similarities, a lot more similarities than them, but they also don't look it. So we're going to have to explain it, why they don't look it when we talk about the Falashas. But I just want you to know that according to our tradition, there is a group or two that did go to Africa. Plus, there have been Jews from Yehuda and Binyamin that traveled to Africa, either before the Churban Bayit Rishon or before the Churban Bayit Sheni. So there could be all kinds of Jews that went there at different times. So that is a possibility. There are even some who claim the Igbos of Nigeria are from the Jews. There's very little to go by. There's not enough information. But it is possible that some Jews went in that direction. But the Falashas are more familiar to us. As you know, today we have a lot of Falashas in Israel. Who are the Falashas? Who are these Ethiopian Jews? Now, they're very sensitive, the Falashas, if you tell them you're not really Jews, or do you come from Jews, or what's the story? I mean, they themselves have a tradition, at least one tradition was, that they come from Shalom HaMelech with the Queen of Sheba. That was the old, original, traditional idea of their origin. The other idea, the other opinion, the other position is that they're from Shevet Dan. We have an old story with Eldad Haddani, famous Jew that came from the Dan, who described where his people are, where some of the other tribes are, according to the information that he had many, many years ago. And so we have a lot of literature about rabbis opining that Falashas may be from Shevet Dan. The other possibility is that they're converts. The other possibility, they are ordinary Jews that eventually came to Africa, intermarried with the black people, and they kept their tradition alive. Part of the tradition, of course, because they don't have the whole Torah. They did not have it till today. But they had something. Now, when you come to this group and you see something, you can't just discount it. They actually have something. The question is, where did they get it from? One thing is obvious. Shevet Dan was not black. In order for them to get this coloration, they've had to intermarry. So this would be a group of people, and there are others who intermarried. So even if we assume it's Shevet Dan, which is possible, they intermarried. Otherwise, they cannot have that coloration. There are no Jews who look like that. And even if you go to live in Africa for 2,000 years, you won't look like that. If you do not marry out of your people, you will still be more or less. You may be darker, like the Yemenites are, because the geography, rabbis explain, does have some influence, the weather, on the coloration. Even if you don't intermarry, you will look different if you're born in Iran and if you're born in America. That's just a fact. It may take 2 or 3 generations. It may take less. These group of Jews have had to intermarry, regardless of their origin, either Shevet Dan or from some other groups of Jews that.
In the early 1980s, I went to Africa to document the plight of the Falashas, the black Jews of Ethiopia. These people were caught in the midst of persecutions, war, and famine. In 1991, the Falashas made international headlines when they were airlifted by the Israeli Secret Service to Jerusalem. What was little noticed is that the Israelis acted only after the chief rabbi ruled that the Falashas were descendants of the lost tribe of Dan.
Okay, so now you are familiar with the Falashas. That's just one group. However, the next group is going to be a little bit about Menashe. Who's Menashe? There's an interesting midrash in Yalkut Shimon that says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu begins to gather the diaspora of the 10 lost tribes, he will begin with Menashe. Menashe will be the first one. And it's very interesting that today there is a group of Menashe that has been making a very, very strong effort to come back to Eretz Israel. I have a lot of information, but of course the time is short, so I'm going to only share with you a little bit of the work that has been done to integrate them. The integration meaning you have to convert. Even if you claim you're Jewish, because of the separation from the rest of Am Yisrael for so many years, we don't know for sure. That is exactly why they required that from the Falashas too, just so to be on the safe side. You want to be able to marry anybody else, then you have to convert.
7 years after the Falasha airlift in a tomato packing plant near the Gaza Strip, I came across a small group that most Israelis take for Thai guest workers. They are a people who come from the hill country on the India-Burma border. They say they are descendants of the lost tribe of Menashe, and there is at least one rabbi here who believes them.
We have to go and bring them before the Messiah arrives in Israel. Our tradition teaches us
This
that
rabbi I know personally has done a lot of work on Menashe and other tribes as well. He's put out several books on this topic, and therefore he is convinced of some groups more than others, and Menashe is one of them. So he went there and took some pictures himself of the Menashe as they're getting ready to join us.
In researching the lost tribes for more than 35 years, he firmly believes that the Menashe are indeed remnants of the tribe of Menashe, sent into exile 2,700 years ago.
Just wanted you to get an idea of what they look like. There are over 1 million of them. And many of them already have come to Israel. Many are still waiting to come. Israel is a little bit afraid, of course, of issuing mass visas to all these people who all of a sudden want to come. Because imagine, let's say you have no income, where you live is a miserable place. Why not move? Why not jump on a plane, jump at the opportunity to move to Israel? Beautiful place. Make up a story. But they did not make up a story. One of their tribal elders in the 50s had a dream. He says, the time has come for you to move to Israel. And they always had this tradition that they're from Menashe. Why Menashe? That's their tradition. They originally come from China. They know themselves that they've traveled all over southern China into India, and this is where eventually they came because they were persecuted. They know that at once upon a time they had a Torah. They even have songs that describe the splitting of the Red Sea. So this group has quite a bit of similarities. They definitely are not Chinese, even though they may look a little bit like them. But why do they? Because they may have intermarried. That, yes. But based on the little bit of tradition that they still have, Rabbi Elyahu was convinced that the time has come to help them out. And, of course, they're very sincere about it. Okay, now we're going to go to Bukhara. For those of you who are from Bukhara or know somebody from Bukhara, what about the Bukharian Jews? Well, here's a picture of them, of what some of them looked like a while ago in the 19th century. Okay. One second. That's better. Okay? So this is what some of them looked like in the back in the 19th century. That is how they dressed. And there was always the idea of these Jews, because they've been there so long, perhaps they are from the original 10 lost tribes. They themselves do not believe it. They think that they're just part of the rest of the Jewish people. But it is possible in the very beginning, that's where they settled, the 10 lost tribes, some of them. They could have later joined them, and you could possibly have a mixture today. Nevertheless, we do know that that general location did have some of the 10 lost tribes. Whether they are or not, we don't know for sure. Most likely they're not. But some of the tribes were in their location, and that is why we have a lot of stories of people traveling that area, meeting up with people that looked like they were Jews, but did not have exactly the entire tradition.
Founded over 2,500 years ago, Bukhara was the cultural center of the region.
From this place, one could go and trade in all directions. The city of Bukhara is really at the crossroads. The legendary Silk Route, which started in the 2nd century, came right through Bukhara. In the 12th century, the famous Jewish traveler Benjamin of Tudela wrote that there was a Hebrew tribe here which considered itself to be one of the lost tribes that were exiled by the Assyrians.
خانه‌پور مهمان آمده است شش صندوق جان تصدوق خانه‌پور مهمان.
As late as the 19th century, British missionary and explorer Joseph Wolfe reported that lost Israelites could still be found living in Bukhara. Legend has it that the most ancient tombs here date back to biblical times. but we could find no markings linking them to Israelites.
What you're seeing now is somebody who actually traveled there to try to find some of the tribes. He went to Bukhara and did some research in the community, those few Jews who are still there, spoke to them, spoke to experts, went to the museum, and found some interesting discoveries, which you're going to see next. But first, he wanted to see what Jewish life is all about there.
So we explored the Mahala, the Jewish quarter, to see if there was a connection to the tribe of Naphtali, also exiled to this area. At first, it seemed that all we could ascertain is that the community is very old.
For many hundreds of years, we've been preparing matzah in this oven. It is a very, very old custom. These customs are ancient, thousands of years old. When God gave us Jerusalem, we were preparing matzah by hand, just like this.
Interesting, no? Yeah. However, it did not help him too much because it appeared to him that they're just a very old community who, even though the Soviet Union pretty much fell apart and they had the opportunity to emigrate to Israel or to New York, they did not do so. So there are still some Jews there. But based on the information that he has, they don't seem to be from the 10 lost tribes. But we're not so sure yet. So what he did next was to go through archaeological discoveries, what researchers have found in that area of Uzbekistan, Samarkand, Bukhara, and the like. And he found some very interesting things.
When they were first discovered, they didn't claim to be Jews, they claimed to be Israelites. It's only in the last few hundred years that they've integrated themselves into the body of the world Jewish community. And the Bukharian Jews are important because they tip you off that the history of the lost tribes is a hidden history. That there are political reasons why their history would have been hidden. So for example, in Bukhara, in Uzbekistan, this country that was part of the former Soviet Union, anything Israelite was hidden and locked up because it was not in the interests of the local authorities to say that Israelites were here before the supposedly indigenous people. And in Bukhara, we actually had a guide who ran the Bukharian Museum who was torn between pursuing the truth and looking out for himself in a political climate where it's still policy to hide anything Israelite. So for example, he gave us access to the basement of the Bukharian Museum. On top in the museum you have all the official history, and in the basement, locked up, you have anything Israelite. And what's in this musty, dank basement? Prayer books, silver platters with Hebrew alphabet on them, locked up. Torah scrolls, Bible scrolls are locked up as if they're some kind of state secret. Anything with a Hebrew letter, anything signifying some kind of historical Israelite presence, locked up. And then when we asked him about Israelites, he didn't want to talk directly about Israelites, but he said, you know, there were these people here that ruled Central Asia for 200 years, and they were called Eftalites.
From our recent digs, we've learned that in the 6th century, Bukhara was the capital of a mighty kingdom of Semites, which also ruled parts of India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Now, in the 19th century, the Russian writer Shubinsky believed that it was in this region that the Israelites were settled. But the people who ruled the area were called Hephthalites. And right up to the present day, we are still debating the origins of the Hephthali dynasty of Bukhara.
So what does the name Hephthalite sound to you like? Naphtali? Exactly.
It seemed to us that the Nephtalites must have been the lost tribe of Naphtali, but we wanted some hard archaeological evidence. We went to the Tashkent Institute of Archaeology, where we gained access to a restricted facility containing a treasure of ancient artifacts. Among them, 2,200-year-old potsherds. Clearly displayed on the ancient clay is Aramaic script, the day-to-day language of the Israelite tribes.
Now, this is clear evidence of the tribes being at that location. Otherwise, what do we have here? Aramaic script, and in some locations you even have a lot of Jewish themes, but written in the Aramaic script, which was the alphabet being used back then at the time. So here we have some evidence, but we don't see them. Where are they? Some historians want to say that all the people therefore in that area, including the Tajikis, who are not too far from Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, all those, either some or all, may have Jewish blood in them. Otherwise, where are they? Now, I'm not so convinced about everything that you're seeing here, because after all, it is possible that what we're seeing are Jewish communities that came there a long time ago, not necessarily from the 10 lost tribes, but nevertheless, once you start seeing all the information that has been uncovered, you begin to see that at least at one time, some of the tribes may have been there. There is enough evidence to see that at least at one point in time, based on what Arab historians have written, based on what travelers have reported, they should have been in that location. So that location is pretty much one of the areas where they were in the past, at least. Could everybody see here the picture? What does that look to you like? How about the person standing in front of it? Japanese. He claims, if you can read it, that he's from Zevulun. And he has this Aron HaKodesh in his home. He grew a long beard. I think he may have ordered that talit from the internet. I don't know where he got it from otherwise. We're not going to talk a lot about the Japanese, but I have some news to tell you. There are some groups in Japan that actually swear that they are from the 10 lost tribes. They have some things to prove it. We don't have enough information, but just to let you know, don't be surprised if one of these days millions of Japanese become Jewish. You know, they've given up already on making cars. Nobody's buying cars these days, right? So what are they going to do next, right? They're going to figure it out now. They're very smart, right? So they're good businessmen. So maybe they are Jewish. Not all of them, but maybe some of them. Just remember, slanty eyes has nothing to do with the genes, at least not in the past. It has to do with the geographical location. Anybody from that part of the world, whether it's Vietnam, Thailand, even the Philippines, will have somewhat slanty eyes. So if you live there, you'd also have it. That in itself doesn't mean anything. But it is possible. After all, we do have a promise that the Jewish nation will multiply like the stars in heaven. We will be millions of Jews. Well, obviously, we're waiting for the 10 lost tribes, and that's going to make a big difference in the numbers. But could it be? It's possible that some of them are. Again, intermarried, assimilated. We don't have enough evidence for them. The next one, however, is interesting. It's about China, real China. There is a group called the Qiangmin that claim that they are from Jewish descent. But there were Jews at all times in our history in China. Even till recently, a lot of Jews escaped from Russia, from Poland, from Lithuania, and they were in in Shanghai, right? So they could have been there in the past too. The Chinese always welcome people, usually except for the Mongol tribes maybe who were barbaric. But there were times where Jewish businessmen traveled on the Silk Road that led to China. Import and export. The Jew was always an import and export. So there were Jewish communities established in China. Are they from the 10 lost tribes? We don't know for sure. But it's interesting to see that till this very day, there are some left in China who are for sure Jewish, and they look exactly like the Chinese do.
The city of Kaifeng was the capital city of the Han Dynasty. Following the Nephthalite trail, we learned that the Chinese records say that the Nephtalites were here. They were labeled Jews or Yuda by the Chinese. It is virtually impossible to identify a Jew in Kaifeng today. But there was one government official who was willing to talk.
There was a Jewish community, but now there is no more Jewish community. There is no Jewish community anymore. Only a few families. This is the synagogue, former site of the synagogue.
Okay. And can you write also here the two family names?
Only for your reference.
I understand.
And most likely, and you will be refused.
这个没有。No no no no， 不在这儿。让他，我帮你问一下。Okay.
We did not find lost tribes in China waiting in their millions. But could the last Jews of Kaifeng help us in our quest?
About 300 years ago, our synagogue ceased to exist. Without the synagogue, there was no place for the Jews to congregate. Without a congregation, there were no more rabbis. Without the congregation, without the rabbis, without the religious rituals or readings of the scriptures, there was no more worship. Nothing was left.
Nonetheless, to this day, there are Chinese people in Kaifeng whose identity papers still describe them as Jews, Yuda.
Yudai, this is his name, right?
Yes.
Does he think he is a Jew?
他问你现在你自不自己还感觉你是犹太人？当然是这样，是这样。
Yes, 是。
我在我民族意识还是有的，民族意识，民族意识。
As you can see, there are small little groups of Jews almost everywhere, from Alaska to New Zealand. Jews went everywhere, they traveled everywhere, but they are not necessarily from the 10 lost tribes. They could simply be old communities, and in this case, unfortunately, a community that almost vanished. No Torah, no tradition, no rabbis, the Bet HaKnesset closed down. There's very, very little left of them. Okay, now we've come to the nicest and perhaps the most interesting part of the lecture, the group that I'm the most familiar with, the group that there is the most indication and evidence that they are of Jewish origin. They themselves say so. We appear to have confirmed that in many, many ways. Traditionally, there has been some contact with them, and they are the Pushtun, or the Pathans of Afghanistan. What you see here is an old picture, a very old picture of the Durrani tribe. And as you will soon see, they look very Semitic. They don't look like anybody else in that area of Afghanistan, Pakistan. Many of the nations in that area look more like the Chinese or like the Indian or like the Persian. These look very, very Jewish. And you will see video footage, you will see some pictures, and you hopefully will also be convinced of their Jewish origin. Here's a picture of one of their chiefs. I think he looks quite Jewish, right? Right? You would never know if somebody told you that, this is not a Jew. He looks very Jewish, right? Now, Some of these chiefs know how to write a kamiya, an amulet, with 2 words. What are the 2 words? Shema Yisrael. And that tradition goes from father to son. They hide themselves in a room, then they write the 2 words. They don't even know what it means. They can't read it. They just have that tradition, and it's an amulet which they used to heal people with. Few people have that tradition. Another picture of an individual who fought the Russians at the time the Russians invaded Afghanistan. He looks more Jewish to me than many other Jews. And again, he has a tradition, just like many of the Afghans do, that they are from Jewish descent. Another 2 individuals from the same group, from the Pushtun or the Pathans. Now here is something interesting. One of them has a name called Rasul al-Jadid. In Arabic, Rasul al-Jadid means the new messenger. A lot of the Jews, or the 10 lost tribes who only converted recently, in the past few hundred years, were given the name al-Jadid. They're newcomers. Many of them were forced into Islam. But as you will soon see, these guys are tough. Even though they converted to Islam, they still kept their own code of ethics, their own traditions. And they're not exactly Muslims in every respect. They may look a little bit like it, but you will soon see that they're very, very different. Here's some more pictures. You will see at the bottom picture a Magen David. That is one of the symbols that you will find in many homes and schools in Afghanistan and in Pakistan if you're traveling in the tribal area. Some more pictures. This is during the time of the Russian invasion. There were the Mujahideen, if you remember them. Some of them today are the Taliban, which may surprise you. Not all Taliban are Pushtun, but they are Sunni Muslims, but they look very, very different than everybody else. Look at the bottom picture, and you will see the man wearing a yarmulke, or a head covering. Look at the top pictures, and you will see something that we'll talk about soon, a garment that has 4 corners. It's tzitzit. They use that as an indication, a strong indication that they are from Jewish descent. Some of them don't know why they are wearing it. Some of them put 2 strings on them. Some of them put black strings on it in mourning over the destruction of the temple. Different groups, different traditions, but all more or less the same. Look at the boy. Also has something that looks like a tzitzit. Even though these pictures are not clear, but that's what they are. Before we actually hear them and see them, I just want to go over with you why we're so convinced about the Pathans. First of all, they have a lot of customs. Customs that are confirmed. Customs meaning the things that they do on a regular basis. Not some yes, some not. First of all, you see Jewish names. You see names like Isaac, Israel, Shmuel, Shimon, Yaakov. Arabs don't have these kind of names. Where did they get these names from? Somebody, an Afghan Jew, even saw or met one of these guys whose name was Akiva. And he couldn't figure that one out. Where did he get the name Akiva from? You know, Suleiman maybe, but Akiva. They have beard and earlocks, peot. They are very makpid on that. Anybody who came to shave them, or a Jewish barber, if that's what it was, a Jewish barber, they would tell him, be careful, don't cut my peot and don't cut my beard. And they point to that as another indicator that they're from Jewish descent, those who know. Circumcision on the 8th day, not like Muslims. I'm not saying every one of them does it that way, but according to their tradition, their circumcision, the Brit Milah is on the 8th day. Talit, as it's called, join namaz, which means a place of prayer, because the talit they put down on the floor and they pray on it. The 4-corner garment, the tzitzit, is something else. The talit is something that they wrap themselves with. According to one tradition I heard, that they claim that whoever wears the tzitzit while they go out to war, he will not be injured from a bullet or anything. Tradition that they have. Again, some of them don't know why they do these things. Yibum, a mitzvah that only applies to Jews. 2 brothers, one married a woman, they have no kids, and he passes away. There's a mitzvah on the living brother, surviving brother, to yibum, to make a yibum, to marry, if they both agree, of course. And the child that will be born will be in the memory of the one who passed away. We have that mitzvah. We don't have that tradition today, for the most part, but they still have it. That can only be of Jewish origin. Shabbat candles. A lot of their older women light a candle Friday evening. They hide it underneath the basket. Apparently, they may have been scared from the authorities. Nida, a woman who's unclean once a month. She separates from her husband. Then she immerses herself in the river, if there is one. Nida. Who does Nida unless they're Jewish? Honor the parents. That could apply to other peoples too, but they're very, very careful with that. And prohibited foods. They don't eat all the foods, all the animals. Not just pig. They don't eat horse meat. They don't eat camel meat. They have a tradition of being careful with certain foods. These are, for the most part, amongst all the groups of the Pathans. The names of the tribes that you will come across: Rabani could be Reuven, Shinwari could be Shimon, Livani could be some Leviim that maybe are amongst them. Daftani sounds like Naphtali, Jaji sounds like Gad, Ashuri, Asher, Yusufsai, children of Yosef, and Afridi, which is a very, very large group, Ephraim. Again, most of them have that tradition. All of them have all these customs that I mentioned. But traditions that they have been known to have in the past, but is not too common to see today, are they don't work on Shabbat. At least some of them don't. Some of them fasted on Yom Kippur. They would go to the Jewish community and find out when Yom Kippur was. One of them actually came one day late and he began to cry. Prayer to Jerusalem, not to Mecca. They have blood. Sometimes they smear on the doorposts if there's a big tragedy. A scapegoat that they slaughter. Curing the sick with Teilim. A Kemiyah that I mentioned to you about Shema Israel. Respect for Torah Moshe. They have a code of ethics called Pushtunwali, where they have the law of Arei Miklat, where somebody killed someone, I think by accident. You have to give him refuge. They're very, very strong in that. And as I mentioned earlier, they have a lot of symbols like Magen David. All of these clear indicators that they are from Jewish descent. Okay, so now let's meet them.
The whole world knows this area as a hotbed of Islamic fundamentalism. There are 15 million Pathans and not a single Jew among them. But we set out to investigate whether under the Islamic surface lies an Israelite past. The first clue was the fact that the Pathans claimed to descend from Afghan, son of King Saul of Israel. From their perspective, Afghanistan is an Israelite name. At worship, they seem like any other Muslims. When studying the
now look at the kids.
However,
this is very important.
they walk their bodies in the manner of Jews.
Nobody rocks their bodies unless they're Jewish.
To this day, it is an ancient code called Pukhtunwali, rather than Islamic law, which commands their ultimate loyalty.
So we have to understand what Pukhtunwali is. What's this code? So we have to speak to one of their elders who can explain a little bit more.
Between your own Pukhtunwali law and Islam, which do the
look what they look like.
Our customs are those of the Pukhtun, or Pathan. There are 11 Pathan tribes in the Khyber. We all have the same customs. The main law here is the Islamic Sharia. But we Pathan follow our own specific Pukhtunwali custom.
Now you need to see them in real life in action.
We are from the people of Moses. And as we travel among these people who look like they stepped off the pages of the Bible, Semitic faces, long beards, biblical garb, prayer shawls, and as the evidence mounted, we could not help but feel that maybe here among the Pathans of Afghanistan and Pakistan, we would find the answers to our quest.
We were astounded to learn that the Pathans adhere to biblical laws that were thought to have disappeared thousands of years ago. As in the Bible, those accused of manslaughter can escape to designated cities of refuge.
It is mentioned in our old books that if you kill someone unintentionally, then you can flee to a designated place of refuge. Our books tell us that Moses ordered Joshua to establish cities of refuge and told the people that they should honor them. Today, we educated people think it is backwards to protect a criminal in this way, but the people in those areas of refuge look upon the matter as holy. To protect a fugitive is the sacred job of the elders. They treat him as their guest.
To enter the Pathan marketplaces is to step back in time. Defying all probabilities, the Pathans still live in tribal groups with Israelite names. Rabbani is similar to the tribe of Reuven, Levani, the tribe of Levi, and Shinwari, the tribe of Shimon. One Pathan tribe known as Gadun is very small in numbers, not unlike the lost tribe of Gad. Interestingly, the most numerous tribe among the Pathans is Afridi, and the most numerous tribe in ancient Israel was Ephraim.
These groups of Pathans, I guess we can call them all Pathans, were a very, very independent group, very, very difficult to control them. And that is why the Americans are having a hard time there. Anybody will.
When I was young and had no beard, my grandfather's uncle died at the age of 115. We called him Baba, or grandfather. He used to say that we are the children of Israel. I was young, and at that age people forget things. They don't care much about history or talk of this kind. But now I would like to know, what are our origins? Where do we come from?
Our grandfathers always told us that we are from the Bani Israel, the children of Israel. They said the Jews are as Pathan as we are.
Two more videos, one of the Afghan community in Israel, what they have to say about their experience with them.
In Israel. Like the Bukharians, they are largely unknown here. They remember their former Pathan neighbors as not quite Jewish, but perhaps related to them in some way.
They were the ones who wore these prayer shawls, four-cornered garments like we do. And they didn't really know what they were, and they used to be surprised to see us wearing similar things. They would say to us, "You're Jews? How could you be Jews?" They'd be surprised. I remember them coming from the border areas, from the mountains, from Pakistan, places like Jalalabad. And I remember people said that to this day they still lit candles on the Sabbath. They would put the candles under these baskets and didn't know why they were doing it. They had all these traditions they didn't know the origins of. Except they said, that is what our forefathers did.
They think they were Jewish?
They thought they were more Jewish than us.
That's right. That's what they still think. And for the last video, this is a little bit of evidence that was discovered to show the connection between them and the 10 lost tribes.
We did look further. We were tipped off that across the border in Pakistan, there was another stone rarely mentioned by Western scholars.
Look at that. There it is, right over there.
What is it? What is it?
Here, the stone was accessible. To our surprise, we discovered that it too was not written in Sanskrit, but in the Aramaic alphabet.
I see all the letters, the Aleph, the Ain,
And I'm standing in front of this 2,300-year-old postcard from the Lost Tribes. And when we pack up our gear and we go, and I'm like in shock, because I didn't expect to find it. I was thinking it's in Gandhar. I didn't know there was another one here. And there's two more in places we didn't go. And one has on it the Hebrew month of Elul. So then this guide comes up to me, and they told me, don't say you're Jewish, don't say anything, because people here are very Muslim, they may not take kindly to you. So he says, why were you able to read that? And I feel, I don't want to lie to this guy. And I said, because I'm a Jew. And this person, who's supposed to be my enemy, leans over with tears in his eyes, embraces me, and says, then you are my brother.
Impressive. Okay, just to finish up, as you know, we're living in a generation where many of our brothers who have been lost in Spain and Portugal, known as the Marranos, Anusim, are coming back, rediscovering themselves. We're living in a generation of tremendous amount of teshuvah, the teshuvah movement. And there's no doubt that during this very special generation, this last prophecy of Yeshaya will also come true. Vaya bayom ha'u, ייתקע בשופר גדול, ובאו העובדים מארץ אשור ונידחים בארץ מצרים. The sound will come out, the sound of the shofar will be blown, and all those who have been lost till now in Eretz Ashur, ונידחים בארץ מצרים, those who have been shoved away in Egypt, וישתחוו להשם בהר הקודש בירושלים, Bezat Hashem, all of us together with everybody here will soon, Bezat Hashem, meet the Mashiach, במהרה בימינו in Eretz Israel. Amen.